Alrighty, in this video I'm going to be putting all this back in the bike. Hang on, it's already... HoonTV! It's Saturday and I'm in the shed finally. I've got everything back to start putting this engine back together, so I'm pretty happy. Big thanks to Sam Hayden and all the crew at Neat Gearboxes, because I've got a very sexy gearbox here now, so I'm going to show you that if you get excited about gearboxes. But also a quick whiz across the bench to see what's going on. Okay, so let's start in here, which is the gearbox. So look at that. They are some very nice, look at that, shiny. So that's all isotropic finished, and it even feels shiny in my hand. They put a little bit of oil on it just to make sure it doesn't go bad, but everything, shift forks, everything's all shiny. And what they do is they do the full treatment on it, and then they get in and clean it all, make sure there's no media left anywhere. But look at that. I'm actually just going to dig up another standard one so I can compare them for you. I also treated myself to a set of cheap circlip pliers this morning because the other ones I had are super annoying and crap, so hopefully these ones are better. But let's delve deep into this. Ooh, let's try not to drop this. Alright. Don't lose that. So there you go, there's stock and slightly worn versus the treated one. So look at that, it's all shiny. And it's not just for looks. I'll put a link below to explain what the deal is. But anyway, so that back in the box there. You sexy beast of a gearbox can go over here. And as an example too, this Nova gearbox over here, which I'm not going to pull out, that's all super finished as well. So that's there for this future engine, which I've spoke about before. So there's my Sigma clutch. Very happy with the way the clutch is. Don't even know where it is, it's over there. Inside here, the casing's all cleaned up, ready to go. I've actually gone through all the colours, made sure all the new bearings, which I've pulled out of all their packets over there from CMS, are in. The old bearings here, which these are the Conrod bearings, which weren't actually that bad, are all on the bench here. I've replaced both Conrods and main bearings. The Conrod bearings were not bad, but the main bearings we're just looking a bit sad, so yeah, I've given them a bit of a hard life, so thank you bearings for your service. You are no longer needed. So bearing caps there. Under here is rock cover with the cams and all the bolts and stuff like that, head bolts. There's the two shafts from the gearbox, which I'll be using. There's my two crappy pairs of circlip pliers. All of my spaces, I put all of them in a pile, but I know where everything goes. Plus, thankfully I have not one, but two workshop manuals, the Climber and the Haynes one, so best of the best wins there. So I'm pretty sure they're both pretty good. I've used them both before. Now inside here, the crank's all sitting in, and what I did the other day was I went through and I used Plastigauge to check the bearing clearances. It's pretty hard to see in there, but I went through, double checked it against the manual. Obviously you torque down the bearing caps on the Conrods and then put the bottom half of the casing onto the top half and then bolt that down and torque it up as well. Hot tip, always under your torque wrench after you're finished with it, even though it's a cheap crappy one. But, and that's my old gear that can go back in there with that stuck to it. So anyway, yeah, basically going by what the instruction manual says, or the workshop manual, you have to go in and see those little tiny bits of green in there that are squished. They basically show you what your bearing clearances are, and visually, obviously they're all the same across the mains and the big end bearings, but you also measure them too. So get in there with the little gauge on the packet. It's pretty tricky stuff to use too, because it's like a fine thread. It's just nothing to it, but if you're patient, it'll sit there. And basically, yeah, I've clamped it down, checked everything. Everything seems perfect, which I'm very happy about, because I wasn't hoping for anything otherwise. But yeah, other than me pulling this right down and redoing rings and everything like that, the rings are really good, so I'm not going to do that. The bores look good. The head's in really good condition. I've cleaned all that, and that's looking pretty schmicko. So, and as mentioned previously, this is a special head. which was done in 1999 for AMCN magazine. Big shout out to you, Dean Mellor, and everyone else that's worked in that magazine prior to that. Sam and the crew. So anyway, I'm basically going to pull the crank back out, get in there, clean up where the plastic gauge was. I'll actually be assembling the gearbox first, so that when that goes in, crank and bearings can all sit in, and then the top goes and flips upside down. So the the bottom there will get flipped up and put onto there, and then we'll go bolted down. But obviously I've gone through and made sure that every single surface here is clean. There's no more sealant on here, and obviously being very careful with putting just a minimal amount of sealant on the casing. Some people don't use it, but yeah, I don't feel like I'm comfortable with not doing that. So just a really minor amount, otherwise you notice that it squishes everyone, it goes into your engine. So, but other than that, I have a gearbox to assemble, so I'm not really gonna, because I want to concentrate on what I'm doing, and I think it's a bit boring to film all that. So I'm going to basically get old mate GoPro up here.
So I'm going to utilize this awesome little 3-footed monster mount. They're super sick.
And do a bit of a time lapse as I sort of nut my way through it. I'll make a bit of space on the bench here, so I've got plenty of room, concentrate on it, look at the workshop manual, make sure everything goes back in. Plus I can also put it in and check it as well before it all goes back together. So all worth doing and double checking. So that's assembled. I have no doubts that my phone's going to ring as soon as I start doing this. But anyway, so I've got all the gears on here. That's obviously locked in there. Everything's all in place, all good to go. What I did do, I had reference of the old gearbox here, and I've got so many spare parts, bits and pieces everywhere. Gearboxes galore, but also the best thing about these instruction manuals is it gives you a guide of what's here along the shaft. And my phone's ringing. Try again. So I've been following the instruction manual here. It shows you from left to right or right to left, or from end to end, or whichever way you want to go, which part goes where. So it's all pretty straightforward. And then if you just follow the bouncing ball and go down the list, even though it's weird that it goes that way, and it shows you, okay, slide that, and then a gear, and then a washer, and then a circlip, and then
no end then. That's all I want.
Rinse and repeat. And basically I'm just putting this old one together, so it's going to be back in a box. But the new one, which is held in the vise by the nut that holds the sprocket onto the shaft, not the actual shaft in the vise, is all there. Everything's on. Everything looks beautiful. One trap is that there are microscopic holes in the shaft here. Well, not microscopic, but tiny little holes, as you can see on this one. And then relevant as well in this gear here, which is very hard to see, but there's a little hole in there. So they have to line up because that's your oil supply. Yeah, so I've made sure everything lines up, because obviously if you're not getting good oil supply through the shaft into the gearbox, then yeah, it's going to blow up. So I'm on to the next one. I'm going to, like I said, put this one together, and then this one can go sit into the engine casing there, ready for when the rest goes in. Alright, fast forward, and I've got this just sitting in here. It's all spinning nicely, and that's in neutral as well, so everything's going there. It's not ideal to check it like this because I don't have any shift forks, so they determine where everything sits, but it is getting all 6 gears. And when I say where it sits is, you can't really check for binding or anything like that, because this one here, if that slides across, that can collide there. So that might throw me off, but the shift fork might hold it from doing that. So I just, at the moment, this is all dummied up. I've double checked everything twice. I actually had to pull the shafts apart again and double check them because I thought I'd forgotten something, but I hadn't, thankfully. Now I'm going to be just cleaning off these bits of plastic gauge and then putting some assembly lube on the caps and pulling the crank out, setting it back in. And yeah, and then I can actually set the gearbox in the top half because it's got the locator pin here on this bearing surround or whatever it's called. Actually, I'll give you the technical term for that. It is a, number one, it is a, no, it's a needle roller bearing. Yeah, okay. It's not a needle roller bearing. The one next to it's a needle roller bearing. Anyway, that's the needle roller bearing housing. So that's got a locator pin there, which locates in here. And likewise with the other one, there's a little pin here, a little pin here. The other thing to watch out for on these as well is on this, there's a line through here, which is very relevant because that line lines up with this here, which is a little sort of, little metal, it's almost like a bit of piston ring. it's like a locator ring. And then this groove here is where the outer for that goes, so that actually sits into there, so you can't push them in. Like I said in the earlier video, that locks into the housing, so it's in there and the top and bottom lock it together. The other thing is too is there's a little notch here, because on this bearing here there's actually a little tiny pin, and that pin goes into that to stop that bearing from spinning around. And so as long as that pin's lined up and that's lined up with that groove, which it does on the top half, then it's all good. Pretty good. So get this happening and then I can flip it over. Right, here's a bit of progress. So I've got the gearbox all in. I've popped that on top of there, tested the gears. It's all a bit hard to do it three-handed because trying to do it to check it, so I didn't film that bit, but not very exciting anyway. But now I've got to do the all-important making sure I put this seal in here. Luckily, thanks to the legends of Honda, it comes pre-lubricated, so that'll just go on there. Just got to lift the shaft up and pop it in, but I will put a little tiny bit of 3-bond in there as well. Going to put the slightest amount of 3-bond around the edges where it seals up on the outside, not the inside. So obviously making sure you don't get any into the oil parts. Another thing I noticed was that this dowel pin was missing, which is kind of important because these run 3 dowels in the engine here. There's 1, 2 and 3, and what they do is they help to pull everything together, and that's obviously quite important because that's stopping these 2 gears from pulling apart. Thankfully I've got some spare bits, so I had spare one. But, yeah, let's throw it together now and start assembling the bottom end. Alrighty, the time lapse is still going and it's up the other way on the bench now. Just got to do the top bolts in here, and as I've mentioned before, you see there's a little arrow there. All of the bolts with an arrow head next to them are the ones that have a copper washer on them. There's 2 here that don't, up in here and up in here, but the rest of them have. So there's 2 8mm and 4 6mm. So I might have skipped ahead a little bit, and it's all together. It's got all new side covers on it, head gasket's all fresh, all that sort of thing. The engine's still old and grubby looking, but that's just because I haven't done like a full engine build on this thing. It's just been new bearings and a wipe down basically, and then cleaning on the inside. But other than that, it's ready to go back in. I will be using all these bits and bobs here for the next one, but yeah, this one here is just merely just getting the thing back in the bike with the gearbox freshened up, so it will be awesome. All right, so I've skipped ahead again and the engine's in. I've done this so many times now, it just sort of seems to happen pretty quickly. These are a cool setup because basically, I've shown in the past, there's one big bolt that goes through the bottom, another bolt that goes through these 2 hangers in here, 2 bolts that pull the engine up against the side of the bike in the frame here, up against the frame I mean. And then on this side, something you never forget, there's a spacer in here, so that allows a gap for the engine to come up into, so the spacer goes in there. But then also down here is an adjustable nut, which is really hard to see. Here's one I prepared earlier, which screws in and then pushes up against the engine to lock it into place, and then you lock it in with a castle nut, so it all goes in nicely, and then the bolt that comes through that locks up. So we're in. I'm just about to go through and put on these AS3 silicone hoses. I decided to upgrade that, not just the radiator, so new radiator, new silicone hoses. Everything was getting a bit old, so I'm just giving it a bit of a birthday. And then on will go the headers and the carburetors, and basically I just got to fill it up with oil and a fresh filter, which will just be effectively for running. But then from there, to get it run up on the dyno and oil change, and it's ready to go. Slight moment, I'm going to beep that out, but just cranked it over and no plugs in it, so it won't start up, but it has oil pressure. Woohoo! Alright, next step is to put the radiator back on and fill it up with coolant, put the plugs in and fire it up, but that's tomorrow's job. So, awesome. Fresh haircut. Right, so it runs. I started it up today and it runs fine. Everything's good. I put a bit of start you bastard in the carburetors. I won't start it now because it's late at night and I have wonderful neighbours. And the only downside was that this little bit in here of the carburetor where the fuel feeds in, splits up and goes in the fuel bowls, I believe one of the O-rings in there is leaking. Big pool of fuel in there and it went down through the bike. They do sometimes come good if you give them a wriggle around. They might dry up. It might be good now, but I kind of feel like I've got a terrible excuse to put these on the bike. Now, these were actually built for that bike over there, but since the engine in that bike came with a set of FCR 39s on it, I kept the carburetors with it that came on it. These were built by Shannon, who is aka that carburetor guy. Absolute legend. I've showed these before. They're all black Cerakoted and very, very nice. Got the offset velocity stacks on it, so all nice and brand new pretty much. Bugger it, I'm going to put them on this. It's going to add a little bit of extra work to putting the bike together and means I've got to tune it again, but I had decided I want to put this on the dyno to bed in the new bearings and so forth, so hopefully we'll be able to get it running well enough so that we can put a couple of kilometres on the dyno. Then I'll just basically take it the hair like this, dump the oil, put a fresh filter on it, and then get into the carburetors and then hopefully get it all good. There's going to be a bit of messing around to get the airbox to sit over the carburetors again, but she'll be alright. Otherwise I could go down the path of the other white bike and just put some pod, sort of foam filters over the top. But yeah, they are very nice and I'm excited to be running them finally because they've been sitting around and they look so super sexy and I love the sound of FCRs. And having ridden that bike once very briefly around the track, it sounded so cool. So, and my 92 blade, there's blades everywhere here at the moment. That one there, that's got FCR 39s on it as well. So FCR life, I think, turning it a bit more into a race bike. So then I'll have more of an excuse to get that other engine built, and then this thing will be a proper absolute animal. What I've always wanted to do to it. Pretty good, but I can't wait to ride this gearbox. Should be pretty awesome now with all that coating and everything slipping and sliding around and jumping into gear nicely. So yeah, awesome. Happy days. All right. So I don't even know where I'm up to because the last couple of weeks have been really busy, but I've got these carbies sitting on there. They're not actually tightened up, but it does start and it runs, which is awesome. Just now dealing with what to do with the throttle cable situation. Basically, it's, I can either go make custom cables, which I've done in the past, but the thing is that I think I'm just going to change the bracket and move that out a bit. So I should be able to get away with extending that. The deal is though is that I need to make sure that the throttle sits in the right spot, obviously, so it sits all the way back. And the drama being, this is really hard to show you, but say that's throttle off all the way around, is that this one sits all the way in and this one sits way further back. So do I go custom cables? Because the OCD in me, we have a longer cable, shorter cable, or do I modify the cable bracket? So, interesting situation. I went custom cables on that bike there. That bike there, I was lucky enough to use the cables that came with the engine. But this one, what do I do? So, just thinking out loud. All right, I'm going to cap it at that for this video. They are on. I have the throttle bracket, cable bracket there modified. Just need to lubricate the throttle cables a bit, but it's working really good. Got full travel there. Stinks of fuel because the accelerator pumps. Good job, Boxer. One trick for young players or old players like me is don't use the wrong fuel hose, which isn't fuel hose, because I just grabbed something off the shelf just to get it running and fuel likes to eat the inside of it. So yeah, don't do that. But thankfully it didn't make any mess or ruin anything. So yeah, use fuel hose. Yeah, so pretty much gonna just leave it there. I'm going to be getting the old airbox to fit over the new carburetors. Probably just a bit of cutting and horrible fiberglass dust and stuff like that, but you get that on the big jobs. And yeah, from there just button up a couple of things, probably just throw on the tail fairing and then I'll throw it on the ute, get it down the dyno. It's not so much of a run in now it's a run in and set up the carbies, but yeah, I'm sure we can do it all in one day, so should be fun. And if you haven't seen me harassing the internet already, we've launched Hoon Coffee. So 3 blends, mild, medium and strong. Check out the website. If you go on there right now and use the code HoonTV, then you'll get a cheeky discount. So thanks for your support.